All right, what we're going to try to do here is demystify this whole spey casting talk. When I first got into it 17 years ago, I mean, I seen a guy walking with a whole armful of these big long rods. I'm going, what the hell are those things? And they go, oh, they're spey rods. And I'm going, spey rods? What the heck is that? And from that point on, from that day on, I started looking into how I could learn to do this. And because there was no one where I lived, there was no one around to teach that sort of casting. It's amazing how you can take a person with one of these rods and in 4 hours have them throwing lines at the distance lines. Not necessarily distance, but casts that they never thought they could make. You know, the old back and forth and single haul, double haul and all that, I do all that stuff too, but compared to that, this is a lot easier to learn. This is a lot easier to learn than a single-handed rod because there's less components in it. You know, with a single-handed rod, it's up, stop, wait for the line to fall back or run out on the back cast, come forward and stop. With this here, it's just you just circle around, the cast just goes. It's like a spinning outfit. It really is like a spinning rod. The beauty of it is now they're making lines for single-handed rods, so you don't even have to buy a long rod anymore. You can just take your little 4-weight, 8-weight, 6-weight, whatever you got, and add one of these lines to it, learn how to do those casts, and you're now doing what they call roll cast or spey casting. We're going to talk about the different lines that we're using spey casting. There's 3 different types of lines that we use, and that is, there's a full spey line, which is 50 to 80 foot in length. That's the head length just itself. There's scanty lines, and there are Skagit lines. Spey lines, a regular spey line, it's a floating line. It's in that 50 to 80, 90 foot long head. Just the head length is that long. It's made to fish big rivers, make long casts. And when you make that cast, you throw it across. It goes into a swing. You step down at the end of the swing. You recast, and that's how you're covering water. After every cast, you step down. That's how these big long heads are used. These big long spey lines are used. Then you get into scanty. Scanty is a line that's only 34 feet long. And to the back of that, we add a running line or a shooting line. Running line is the accurate terminology for it. So we add this, we put our backing on a reel, we put a running line on, and then by a loop system, we attach our scanty line. This is a scanty line. It's a full floating line. Its intended purpose is mostly for dry flies, but you can throw some light streamers and some nymphs on it. But its intent is it's a surface line. When we get into Skagit, that is a whole different situation. It's a head of 22 feet long. You add a 10-foot tip to that. That could be intermediate. That could be intermediate with a little bit of fast sink on the end of it. It could be a fast sink, and we could go extra fast sink. Keep in mind, anytime you're using a sinking tip, it may say it sinks 6 inches a second. That's true, but the minute it comes up against tension, it's no longer sinking at 6 inches a second. It's now being planed back up. So what happens when you make that cast with a sinking tip, you have to put some slack into it via a mend of some kind to allow that line to relax so that it can sink. And you're going to set that up above the suspected area where you feel the fish is holding. We're talking steelhead, salmon right now. But it could be also true for smallmouth or whatever. You could use lines for any species you wanted to. I use a lot of scanty and Skagit for smallmouth, and they work just fine. For wading, it works really nice. Out of a boat, it works fine too, but I really like to wade with these lines. With the Skagit line, and you have to add a tip to it of some sort. You're going to put a leader on the front of that, but the leader length should be a max of 5 feet, and I like to run them around 3.5 to 4 feet. That's because you want that sinking portion to drag that fly down quickly. That's why we use a short leader for that. It's really not about the rod, it's more about the technique and the line. You got to have the right line for this technique. And I'm kind of a Scandi person. I like Scandi lines, but that doesn't mean that it's the only way to do that, because Skagit, if you're going to start digging deep with weighted flies and stuff, that's when we use Skagit with sinking tips to take the flies down deeper. Scandi lines, you're kind of stuck to the top. Although you can use some light sinking tips on a Scandi line, it technically is more of a floating line. And they cast just beautiful. I think the casting part of it interests me more than the application, the fishing application of it. Sounds silly, but I love the way they perform. Scandi lines cast very, very nice. And Skagit does too, but they're not a pretty casting line. They are made to do one thing, and that's to throw out heavy flies and heavy sinking tips. That's what they're made for. And but you can cast great distances with those lines. How all these are connected, it's pretty self-evident, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. Everything's a loop-to-loop system. So the loops come from the factory, all welded up, very nicely done. So all you gotta do is loop your leader into that. Go to the back of this tip, and we're just going to loop that system onto there like that. Come up here and run it through there like this. Taking a lot of time to do this. It seems like a lot of effort, but it's really not. It goes quickly. Boom, and there's the system. It's all hooked up, ready to go. The whole thing is a loop-to-loop system. The running line loops to the head. This being the head, this is the workhorse of the system, and the running line attaches to this by a loop. The tips attach to the front of the head by a loop. So we can everything's interchangeable. You can take one reel. And have a running line on it and change different size heads on it. So you don't only have to carry one reel, no extra spools, nothing. Just one reel and change heads. So if I want to go to a heavier head, I just take the lighter one off, put a heavier one on, vice versa. I go lighter or lighter. So that's the advantage of this kind of system. Every rod has its own grain weight. So with that in mind, that's where the education of this all comes into. You know, you get a lot of different. There are charts that you can get. I pulled the charts off the internet on every rod that's made and the grain windows that fit those rods. That's length, the rod number. In other words, if this was a 4-weight, 11-foot 4-weight, it would give me a grain window for that particular rod. It gives you all the different rods that are made and the grain windows for every rod that's made. And that was off the internet. I believe I got that off of. I'm not even sure what the website was for that, but at any rate, it's there. Typically, when you get these rods, some of the rods, it's even marked on the rods what the window is. But when I say window, that means what's the variables on it. If I want to cast a nice short cast of, say, 40, 60 feet, I'll use my lighter head. If I want to make a cast of, say, up to 90, 95 feet, I will put on a heavier head. So I jump at 50 grains. That loads the rod deeper in the butt. That's where the energy comes from, and that's what it does. That's what the heavier line does. It loads it deeper. So that would be the reason I would bump the grain weight up on this particular rod. If I want to go short and small flies, I'd stay with my lighter one, lighter presentation. If I want to throw a bigger fly and I want to throw a little longer distance, I'll jack up the grain weight by 50, 60 grains, and that will load the rod deeper and therefore throw it farther. It's really that simple, but at first it seems kind of hard to understand. You don't have to know every grain weight there is. All you have to know is what rod you got and the recommended grain weight for that rod. That's all you have to know. You don't have to know all these different grain weights. Spey technique is nothing more than a roll cast. It's all it is. But it's a continuous motion. It never stops. You don't come back and stop and then go. When we get to the casting, then we can demonstrate that. It's all about the technique. It's that pivoting that reel around. Come around, drop it over the top. Come around, drop it over the top. That's all to that cast. But people make a big deal out of it. It's roll casting with a change of direction option. If I'm on the dangle down there and I want to go back upstream, I can just take that rod and go right back upstream again. There's no stripping. On the more ridiculous side of things, here's a 5.5 foot, 5.5 fiberglass rod I made up. This thing will Spey cast 45, 50 feet beautifully. It's 5.5 foot fiberglass. It's got to be 50 years old. It was something I had in the closet, so I built it up. It casts unbelievable. You got to put a little heavier line on it. It's not how much you pay for the rod, it's the ability. I'm telling you. You can spend all kinds of money on stuff thinking, well, now I got this and I got that. If you don't know how, it don't make no difference what you got. Put that in your pulp and smoke it.